Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Sweet and Maxwell, the Thomson Reuters group. This book is a fascinating book in its own right. It's a technical area. It's on drafting trusts and will trusts. It's a modern approach. It's the 12th edition and there's a compact disc to go with it. It's been written by James Kessler, Queen's Counsel. And the title that Elizabeth and I have given our appreciation of this book is, quote, a practical and up-to-date guide to the complexities of drafting trusts. And that's exactly what you're getting here. Let me show you the book. It's quite a heavy book. The precedents are reproduced on CD, which it says there right at the front, which is helpful, again, because in this day and age you do need as much assistance as you can get from the old robots. There is the nice spine, and then at the back you've got the detail of what is contained in it, and then you'll find the CD, which is right at the back there, and then before the CD you've got again a very detailed index. The index is done not by page number but by paragraph numbering, so you know what you can find what you're looking for, and that's explained right at the beginning. It seems to be very much the house style now for Sweet and Maxwell. And then what we've got here is the total pages, I should have mentioned, runs to 700 odd pages. There's also some guidance on the CD right at the back, which I should have pointed out earlier, and how to use the CD, which is quite helpful. There's a license agreement at the back. Now at the front of the book there's really a rather nice painting from Hogarth, which probably some of you have seen, Marriage à la mode. Drafting wills, drafting trusts and will trusts. There's the front page. And there is a very nice dedication which I want to mention because I think that's very important to see. And then there's a foreword from Mr. Justice Hayton, which is again very important indeed, because he concludes by saying this book has now established for itself an indispensable place in the library of any serious trusts lawyer. And that's from a very important judge, who I think one would listen to in very great silence, frankly, because I think that's an important point to make. The preface starts, trust drafting is a professional skill. There we go. Now, I think that's again a very important point. That's from Kessler as the writer of the book. There's a trust discussion forum, very much a book for trust, and there's a website which you can actually have a look at there. There's a note to the lay reader, which I mentioned in the review, and it is important because this is a professional skill. My advice is not to draft your own trust or will, but to find a competent solicitor to advise you. So you have it. Drafting quotations. I can remember my time as a bar student. I came to the bar as an older person, but I did have some experience, and I was quite surprised at how much I actually had to learn about drafting when I did the drafting part of the bar course. That was the bar vocational course. So do bear in mind, drafting is very, very important as a skill. And I can't stress that strongly enough. There's the contents page there, with actually page numbering, and then contents in much more detail, which I found quite helpful. You should be able to find things in the detailed aspects of the contact. So I'll start again. The content in detail section. You should be able to find what you're after quite quickly. There's the table of cases, a lot of them. Then you've got a few other things which I would like to point out. You've got some statutes, of course, national and international non-UK statutes. The abbreviations, only a few of them, but again, very important, I think, helpful, are basically abbreviations of the Acts of Parliament. There are periodicals and other ones. Then you get trust terminology. Now, anybody who's a student will again find the terminology very helpful, because when you first start studying the law of trusts, some of these words are really confusing. So I think you will find the trust terminology quite helpful, even with that. other forms of settlement, types of settlement. And I can tell you now that we have got a much simpler system than we used to have. So I'm very grateful that the simplicity of what we have today is there, which when I first started reading law and studying trusts, I found it very, very difficult. And I know a lot of people do. Then we go into part one, trust drafting itself, and the raid on trusts, Finance Act 2006. I'm not going to say any more about that. But if you go into the middle of the book, will drafting, chapter 18. And I do think the statement made by James Kessler, Queen's Counsel, is very valid about getting professional advice. This is a skill, and I'm not competent enough to do it, and I certainly have, for what I'm looking specifically for, gone in certain circumstances to the relevant expert, because that is really where you do need help, depending on the intricacy of the problem which you are trying to solve or set out. So this is what we say about the book, and it's an invaluable book. It's now, as I say, in the 12th edition, and so it's been around a while. If you're a practitioner involved or charged with the often daunting responsibility of drafting trusts and will trusts, you will find this long-established guide of immense help and value, particularly in the new edition from Sweet and Maxwell, which, as I've said, is part of the Thomson Reuters organisation. It's now in a 12th edition, and it's a testament, by being a 12th edition, in itself, to the reliability and authority of the work. For anybody involved professionally in this area of law, this has to be an essential purchase, and I'm sure they'll all have it in their little libraries. Indeed, the author, James Kessler, Queen's Counsel, stresses that the book is addressed to professional practitioners, rightly so, but at the same time it's accessible to lay readers who, as I say, at that same time are advised not to draft their own wills or trusts. And I say that because reading the book will give you the information probably to back up why you should take the advice of the specialist. And I think that's very important, because in this day and age, if you're spending a lot of money, you need to be wise and sensible about how you're spending it. And that means that the book will help you, but go to the experts for the final say. There are, of course, lots of self-help guides and write your own will kits out there. I'm not going to mention where you get them from, you've seen them, I'm sure. Not to mention the TV ads and those telephone marketers extolling the money-saving virtues of DIY will writing. Not a good idea in my view at all. But these can be a false economy, and that's really what we are suggesting, with possible tragic consequences to follow. So it's usually discernible only when it's too late. So I do strongly suggest that you get help, because frankly, with a lot of things today, if you haven't got a problem, ask, and that gives you that will help you. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to make a final decision, but it's certainly worth considering. Let me have a quote here from the author. "Trust drafting is a professional skill," Kessler reminds us, and I mentioned that right at the beginning of the book, which requires a considerable understanding, for example, of the ever-changing state of tax law. Then there's property law, family law, as well as trust law, the law of succession, and more, just as part of the overall succession planning that you really should adopt. It's not a subject that people want to talk about, but it's something that has to be talked about and has to be planned for if you are sensible, because in this day and age the state can take things, so be aware of it. I know people are, and it's uncomfortable to talk about sometimes, but it's worth considering. The book places much stress on word meaning, objectivity and accuracy, as well as empathy with the client, and of course awareness of the need to avoid error. And in that sentence, that sums up, in my view, a lot of what this book offers as value. On a cautionary note then, we're reminded that some apparently trivial drafting errors have disastrous tax consequences, and that drafting does matter. It certainly does. This then is a plain-speaking practical book aimed at providing guidance on the difficult questions that inevitably arise in practice, including determining which matters are essential and which aren't, with a view to avoiding common pitfalls and traps. The book therefore contains many precedents offered as suggestions, and that's what the author actually says, but they are suggestions and not solutions. And any draft must consider individual circumstances, so there's no one size fits all here. What it means is that you've got the template, you've got the precedents reproduced, and then you hone it down to what you need. The new edition incorporates all the most recent and key developments which have taken place in the last 2 years since the previous edition was published. Coverage and commentary encompasses, for example, the following: the Trusts, Capital and Income Act 2013, the Marriage Same-Sex Couples Act 2013, the Inheritance and Trustees Powers Act 2014, and the Finance Acts 2012 and 14, and earlier ones which you will see mentioned. Significant case law is also provided, including Loring and Woodland Trust and Brooke and Purdon, on transferable nil rate bands. Let me conclude by saying that for experienced and slightly less experienced drafters alike, this book offers invaluable expertise and insight into the complexities of this subject. It's stylishly written and easy to navigate. It does indeed convey a modern approach, which I think is a useful phrase here, and it should be regarded, I think, as an essential acquisition for the professional trust lawyer. Sure, he's got it. I'm sure members of the judiciary will find this a particularly fascinating read as well, if you're involved and love trust law. And I have to say, I think trust law is fascinating. It's not everyone's taste, but there's some great case law there, and you can make it really entertaining if you teach it, believe me. The law is stated as at the 1st of September 2014. Here's the book again. You gather I'm a bit of an enthusiast about this. There's the front, there's the spine, and then there's the back. I like the book. I think it's great. It can get, I mean, looking just here, wills and care fee planning. There we go. Again, an uncomfortable area for some of us to have to talk about. I've had to deal with it, and therefore you have to know what you've got to do. It's, I'm afraid, a fact of reality. But I think this book is very helpful. Trusts for disabled beneficiaries. You see, you've got an awful lot of hands-on stuff here. I like this bit at the beginning here. This is one of the earlier chapters, chapter 4. Principles of interpreting trust documents. And guess who turns up? Lord Hoffman's speech in Investors' Compensation Schemes. So there we have it. I think a very good book. I'd like to thank James Kessler and all the people involved at Sweeten Maxwell. It's an excellent book. It's fundamental. We have to have these books as practitioners and advisors to help us do our job in this day and age. And I'm very grateful to the publishers and all the people for putting their thoughts down on paper and letting us have it. It helps and makes a difference. So thank you. Bye-bye.